Real Country 1430 AM and 107.3 FM WRDN. Brian Winnikins from Commodity Classic. Thank you to our Commodity Classic sponsors, including Wisconsin Corn Growers Association, Osteoplastics, Synergy Co-op, also Wisconsin Farmers Union, and the Wisconsin Soybean Association. And joining us is Sarah Stelter. She's the Vice President of the Wisconsin Soybean Association. And we're going to talk a little bit about her farm today and about some of the things she does on her farm and that even soybean growers across Wisconsin do on their farm with sustainability. And Sarah, thank you for joining us today. Well, first, tell us about your farm.
Well, as stated earlier, I'm from the Watoma area, so I farm in the Central Sands area of the state, about halfway between Watoma and Coloma. I have about 800 acres that I raise processed vegetables on, corn, soybeans, and I also have a cow-calf operation.
You got a lot going on there.
Yes, I do. It definitely keeps us busy, and I have some pretty awesome help or I wouldn't be able to do it.
So so you're on the Central Sands, so there's a lot of things you have to do to take care of these fields and take care of this land. What are some of the things that you do on your farm that even a lot of Wisconsin soybean growers are also doing?
Well, one of the things we have been doing, not just recently, but actually in our area for generations, people have been cover cropping, because if we don't cover crop, then we lose our soil over the winter. So then we start with a nutrient management plan, and we try to follow that as best as we can. And once we get our crop in and then off again, we'll plant cover crops. With the corn, with the exception of corn and soybeans, we'll try to follow the vegetables with cover crops, which we then can plant no-till planting corn and soybeans in the following year.
So how do you work in with all of these different rotations? Because, green beans and peas are going to have a lot different rotation than corn and beans.
Absolutely. It's not like we just decide one day to go out and plant certain crops. We're literally looking at 2, 3, 4 years down the road in terms of what our rotation is going to be because of the vegetables and because of the fertilizer we're using and the sprays that we're using. We have to be very cognizant of what's going to be going in that field in the future.
How do the soybeans fit into that rotation? Is it always follows corn, or is it's always following green beans, or how do you determine that?
Well, we look at what's been in the year before. So when we plant soybeans, that's going to be following a corn or a sweet corn crop. And then we may be planting green beans into that crop after the soybeans come off the next year.
We're talking with Sarah Stelter. She's the Vice President of the Wisconsin Soybean Growers, or the Soybean Association here at Commodity Classic. So Sarah, since you're on the Central Sands, you have a lot of irrigation, I would assume.
Correct. We have irrigation, and contrary to what some may believe, we don't just turn on the water every time we feel like it. It costs us a lot of money to turn a pivot on. So we look at what the crop needs and what the weather forecast is, and we determine on that basis whether or not to turn on a pivot. We also will put nitrogen on through our pivots. So what this allows us to do is we are able to spoon feed nitrogen onto our crops 4 or 5 times throughout the season. This is critical when you're looking at working on sand. We really need to be able to just put our chemicals and our nutrients on gradually as opposed to all at once.
Now with the cover crops, what type of cover crops do you use?
Primarily we use rye and oats, but we're trying to do more of a mix. So we've also done sorghum sedan, and the benefit of that, we'll do like a sorghum sedan rye mix where we can put that in after our vegetables, and that will be tall enough so that before it freezes, we're able to cut it and use it for cattle feed. And then, of course, we've got the residue still on the land. We don't work the land. We just leave it to hold then over the winter.
So I know with farmers in Pepin County in western Wisconsin and other locations, they're starting to kind of discover this cover cropping. Have you noticed over the years on your farm an increase in organic matter in those sandy fields and that it's actually holding more water?
We've definitely noticed a difference by doing more cover cropping. I'm now like on the probably the third series of maps and soil samples through the nutrient management plan process, and we are able to see our organic matter improve in most cases, and our phosphorus levels go down. So it's been by using more cover cropping and looking at better ways that we can work the land, we're definitely noticing a difference.
Talking with Sarah Stelter. She is Vice President of the Wisconsin Soybean Association. She has a farm out in Watoma. I would think that a lot of members of the Soybean Association at Commodity Classic here, or even just back home if they didn't have a chance to go, you've all probably been talking about the same thing, input prices.
The input prices are way up there this year, and not only is it the pricing, but now of course we've got the concern about whether or not we're going to be able to get the what we need when we need it. I'm in a position where I've been able to purchase all of my fertilizer already. It was double or more than double than I paid last year. So we obviously have to look at what that's going to be costing us and what we can get back in our return.
Meanwhile, the fuel has to be an issue as well, especially for not only harvesting your beans and planting it, but with the vegetables. I would assume that this isn't like, oh, I'm just going to run a combine through. How do you do all that?
Well, we don't harvest our vegetables. The canning companies do, but of course we've got to still get into the fields and work the fields and spread the fertilizer and you can't really contract fuel. Unfortunately, you just got to kind of bite it and try to get the best price for your crop that you can.
Again, talking with Sarah Stelter. She is Vice President of the Wisconsin Soybean Association here at Commodity Classic. As we've looked farther down the road here with exports and things like that, especially for soybeans, do you see a lot of opportunity for Wisconsin soybean growers coming up?
I think right now we're kind of in a position to just see what's going to happen with Ukraine and how that's going to affect everything. I think it's really important that we start talking about using biodiesel and ethanol more than we're using as part of the solution to the problem. And I'm a little disappointed that we aren't hearing more about the importance of biodiesel and ethanol and this whole plan to get enough petroleum products into the American public.
And I know even like in Minnesota, they have like the B20 with the diesel program, but it seems like it's just not taking off. And is that a function of people not knowing? Oil companies just saying we're not going to do it? Government saying we're not going to force them? A combination of all three?
I don't honestly know why it is such a hard thing to break into. The East and the West Coast use biodiesel a whole lot more than we do here in the Midwest. And I don't understand it. I don't know if there's just a whole lot of myths out there that we're too cold to use some of these products or just what it is. I know as someone that's been trying to use biodiesel on my farm, I'm very frustrated by the fact that I can't buy it in bulk. Now, there are some gas stations that are selling biodiesel, but I can't run all my equipment to the local gas station to fill up. I cannot order biodiesel, however, through my local co-op or any of the other local co-ops in the area.
Have they ever told you why?
I think it's like the chicken and the egg scenario. It's like, well, we don't have enough demand. Well, there's not the demand there because you can't access the fuel. So it's a dilemma, and I honestly don't know why it's not more available.
And a reminder, if you'd like to find out more about what Wisconsin soybean growers are doing, don't forget to visit their website, badgerbean.org. It's pretty cool. I've had a chance to take a look at that website, Sarah. It's a pretty cool website.
It's a very cool website, and there's a lot of good information and good research information on that website.
From Commodity Classic, that's Sarah Stelter. She's the Vice President of the Wisconsin Soybean Association. I'm Brian Winnikins for WRDN.